welcome everyone. I'm really happy to be here today, and I just want to say, first of all, Craig, it's nice to meet you face to face for the first time. I know that I know you through Victor and Wendy, also to Karen, and to those I've probably seen some of you at different events or different demonstrations of mediumship. So hello to everyone, and I'm sure we'll cross paths somewhere. Basically, I'll probably just talk about what is different in my path, is that I didn't go down the traditional mediumship path that most mediums have gone down. And I remember talking to a friend of mine that's also a medium, and I'd reached around 500 or 600 events, and he said, "Louise, why aren't you teaching mediumship?" And I said, well, look, you know, I think that I've acquired enough knowledge now to teach that. A lot of my learning with spirit has primarily just been through that total experimentation with spirit. So just to give you a very short background of the work that I work with spirit, I started out doing mediumship demonstrations before individual readings. So I got up one day and did a demonstration that lasted for 2 hours. And then, of course, I went into trance while I was in a public demonstration. I just finished demonstrating mental mediumship, and at the end of that, I went into trance in front of the audience, spoke a foreign language, which was Chinese, and then then something miraculous. We were only talking about this yesterday. Someone in the audience got a healing, and from that, we started a healing group. And then in the audience one day, there was David and Jean Ingman, who were the leaders, circle leaders of David Thompson's group, and they turned up at an event and offered their home to open it up for physical mediumship. So I have to say that I wasn't out there looking for anything, as Wendy and Victor always know. It sort of ended up on my doorstep, and so every week I demonstrate mental mediumship on Friday nights to audiences across Australia. We've now hit about 700 events. We've got 50 volunteers in that. And then in the healing part of it, we do hands-on healing, and we have a healing group once a month, and then we have physical mediumship every Wednesday night practically. And Eddie, who's part of this group, Eddie captures, which I'll show some photographs today. Eddie is part of our group and a very important part of our group. So basically, I work across all those streams, from mental mediumship through to hands-on healing and distant healing. We get a lot of distant healing from our audience events in mental mediumship. And then we have our physical group. And then, of course, in that stream is also trance mediumship that comes into that as well. So what I'm discovering now after all these years is I'm getting a ports in the middle, in light, in mental mediumship in front of audiences now as well. So what I want to say today is that primarily I think that the more we are trained, what I've discovered, I've been untrained, untouched. So I believe we are, if we're going to be developing our mediumship, we need to be looking at ourselves in terms of being a creator, a co-creator with spirit. And I remember going back 10 years ago, and I used Google Earth in my mind in mental mediumship. And being a computer engineer, I remember thinking, well, why can't we use Google Earth? And my team had come back and said, well, look, there's problems with time and space. We got problems with that. And I said, well, look, let's test it out. And we had lots of errors publicly. I ended up in Germany or ended up in the UK in the wrong town. But after all these years, I use it every Friday night just about. And I'll say, this person was so many kilometres away from here, this town. That's quite accurate now. So when we're working in mediumship, we really have to be willing to put ourselves out there, really, literally. And because I wasn't doing individual readings, because I was working full time and just doing public demonstrations on a Friday night, you didn't have any time to practice. You were out there in the audiences. And most of the people that were in my audiences were not spiritualists. Most of them were either work colleagues in corporate organisations, which was good because they were skeptics. They were looking for evidence. So my background was the best thing that happened to me. And of course, at the time I was living in a police house, which I lived for many years in Sydney. So as a result of that, I was surrounded by skeptics. And so that is what drove me to produce data in mediumship. You know, what is your name? What are the details? Times of death started to come through. So I believe that mediumship is definitely a mirror of our own mind. And I believe that we don't take a passive approach. We don't sit and wait for spirit just to impress everything upon us. We go back to spirit as co-creators of that team and ask them, why isn't this possible? And they have come back plenty of times and said, look, mediums haven't pursued it. Well, good, let's try it, let's pioneer it. And even if it doesn't work, I don't care if I'm not the medium that ever presents this work. Perhaps there's someone in England in 5 years' time that can pick up that part of that running on the ground with the idea. So in mediumship, I'm probably against separating trance mediumship, trance healing, mental mediumship, physical mediumship, and so on. I think we just need to just look at it as energy and blending with energy from those in other places, and looking at the possibilities that we are like a physician, that we shouldn't just look at it as a specialist area, that we can combine those energies when there is a need. So I think that that's the most important thing in mediumship. When I have seen apports a few months ago when I was demonstrating an audience, some apports fell across from above my head. It was quite funny. And people didn't know anything about physical mediumship. They felt the breeze, or they felt the touch on their foot, and I think that there was a need. I was reading somebody that lost a child, and that person, as I was talking about a $5 note had materialised above me. So I think the need in mediumship and the willingness to really serve and surrender your mind to spirit, I think they are the two most critical catalysts in any development. And the rest of it, as Wendy and Victor know through the years that I've known them, it will come to you if you have the guts to experiment, the guts to pioneer, and the guts to put yourself out there to heal, to help people and give them a message. I'm just getting a thought in my mind to talk about language. I just want to step back to that before we get into physical mediumship. For those that are developing physical mediumship or any form of trance, for me, I believe that confidence wasn't an issue for me because I was speaking a different language. That was, I burst it out publicly in a different language. But I'm just having a thought in my mind now. For those that are developing physical mediumship, of course, you have to get into the trance state first. And I'm just getting a tip in my mind now. Perhaps ask your guides to come through with words that are from a different language. So if you're going into trance or before you go into physical mediumship, that ask them to give you some words that are not in English, so you know they're not in your mind, and a language that you're not aware of, that today you could even Google that language to see where it's coming from. Now, your guide may not be coming from that area, but at least gives you the confidence that it's not in your subconscious mind. Does that make sense? I live in Sydney, and of course I have family that's in another region, in Newcastle, on a property, and when I stay there I stay in a caravan on the property. So I do have, because the caravan's small and of course it's dark, late at night after coming home from a demonstration in Newcastle, I see a lot of activity that's there. It's not just because it's just the grounding with horses and cattle, and we rescue animals and they're on the property there as well. And so that grounding there, I think, enables, there's no interruption, enables spirit to also interact and to experiment there as well. The caravan is quite small, so it's not, it's like, I suppose it's probably a cabinet when you think about it, because I don't work in a cabinet. And so that property, I believe, is a place for spirit to experiment. And I have seen things where I'll come home and text messages will be on the phone from spirits that are deceased or just after a demonstration. So I believe that after that combination of mental mediumship and that build up of that energy, they use that, and when I come in after midnight, they may use that energy to experiment. It's like a different power cell, another battery for them to work with. And of course, the love of horses that I've ridden for years and animals are important there as well. And I think that we don't consider that when we look at mediumship. I often say to a lot of audiences, one of the biggest regrets that people have when they pass over is they ignored the cat or they ignored the dog, because those animals are a very important part of our connection with who we are. And so I believe all of these cows and horses and everything else that I connect with on that property are part of that conglomerated energy that we work with. And I've seen materializations, partial materializations of animals and so on in that caravan. But yeah, it's a great place to go to. I'm not thinking about anything, and I find there's a lot of activity that goes on there. So because I don't work in a cabinet, and just to answer the question that Wendy had earlier on, I don't work in a cabinet. I had a vision 10 years ago, and I had an agreement with Spirit. I don't know why I was even thinking that, but I said 10 years ago, look, I won't work in a cabinet, and I want to work in light. And I'll give you 25 years every Wednesday night. That's our agreement. And I look back now, and I think I was ahead of my time before, you know, photoplasm and all of that came about. I made that agreement and I stuck to it. And lots of people had said, Louise, why don't you go in the cabinet, go into darkness? By now you would be producing some solid ectoplasm. I said, of course I would be, but it's not the way of the future. We cannot, I believe we're limited by just sitting in a group of 20 people. We can't change the world, and we can't change consciousness doing that. So it depends on what you think your path is. I'm happy to produce this new energy and hand it over to somebody else. I really am. If somebody else can do a better job and work with the Spirit team and a better vessel for that, then so be it. But I believe we limit ourselves. I do truly believe we limit ourselves. And cabinets are great to build the energy up. I'm not against that. I just probably wouldn't rely on that, because I believe if you want to be under experimental conditions, you've got to be out of that cabinet. And I believe that the less things we have around us that limit us, the less ability of the person that's skeptic to wonder why we're closing everything up and darkening everything up. And so I believe that over the years we should be moving beyond that mindset. Not that I'm against, you know, Wendy, I've sat with David Thompson in the dark, seen brilliant materialisation. Williams, you know, come up and shook my hand. I've spoken to Gordon Higginson. I've seen a lot, and it's fantastic, but I think we need to move beyond that. For me, that process for ectoplasm, I found a lot of it coming through the nostrils, through the ears. I experienced, this is not just in our group, which I'll show some photographs soon. It was happening just during the day. It was happening when, you know, out and about in light. And for me, it had an adverse effect. I was feeling quite nauseous in the beginning of it because it was happening during the day. So the ectoplasm that I believe that I'm producing is more of a, in between a gas. At times it can be a liquid. Eddie took a little sample of something a couple of months ago. And so mine is not so much liquid, it's more of a gas. And then at times you will feel that wet and that darkness. So it started out more or less into the nostril area, and then now the most prominent area is the left ear. And so we would get that flowing through. And actually in a mental mediumship demonstration one evening, this is quite a few years back, a lot of the audience saw a large fog forming behind me and about 10 people standing in that fog. So it wasn't really an ectoplasm, it was more of a mist and a combination of, or it's ectoplasm, but not in the traditional sense of liquid, more of a gas and more of a projection of light is probably the best way to describe that. And Eddie, who's part of our group, as well as Maina, have said a number of times they've seen me produce my own light as well. So I believe it's just an energy. It is an energy, and I believe they manipulate that energy and it becomes more gas, more liquid, dependent upon the conditions of the environment. That's my belief of that. Now, Eddie, you may be disappointed because there's probably better photos than this that you've got somewhere. These, I don't look at anything because then it places things in my mind. So Eddie will contact me and give me some stuff over the years, but I don't traditionally listen to any audio. The only audio we'll ever listen to is if I use it in a workshop in mental mediumship, because we have a lot of inspirational stuff come through, about 400 hours of inspirational high-level teaching that comes through our group. So we share that. But traditionally, I don't look at a lot of stuff, but I will show you a couple of photos here. Now, so this is me before the trance state. This was captured, just me chatting away to the group. As you can see, I just sit in front of the television. We have had some instances where I've been zapped by us not turning the television PowerPoint off. By sitting right in front of it, I've sort of been thrown sitting in that chair a couple of times. But this is a photograph of obviously my energy starting to build up before the session. So we just sit, there's nothing fancy. Eddie just sits on the lounge sometimes, it falls asleep. And a couple of the group just sit around me. And then this is just a photograph here of the energy building up, of course, I believe from the solar plexus area, heart area here. One thing that we have noticed more recently in the last couple of months, and we don't know why, they've really been tapping Eddie's done a bit of research on this, tapping the neck area intensively, which Eddie, you can add to this at any time, which Eddie had investigated was the thymus area, which is the higher consciousness area. So as I'm going into trance, they're generally tapping into the higher neck area now quite intensively as I'm going into that session. So this is before I go out, and then as you can see in this photograph, you can start to see the aging in my face going on here as I'm starting to go into that altered state. I believe it doesn't look like me in this photograph. You can start to see a bit of transfiguration. And at this time of this photograph being taken, we were working with a main guide known as Ludwig. And Ludwig, you would consider Ludwig to be like best way to describe him is like a university professor. Very intelligent, could answer any question on anything to the group. And I believe the transfiguration that's occurring in this photograph just when we're starting is very much his energy that's impressing onto my face here. As we go into the next one, you'll start to see the energies starting to build up here just in front of me. We've got some excellent videos which we're not able to show here, but on video you'll actually see literally hundreds of orbs entering the room as I'm going into that altered state. So these photographs probably give you a bit of an idea of the altered state and how that energy starts to build up, that power that we build up with spirit. So in this photograph, I believe we're capturing here the power that's building up with spirit and that manifestation of them working closely in the energy field. Then when we go into the next photograph, you'll start to see a sense of formations that are going on here. And what we notice in some of the photographs is you'll get that foggy sort of sense coming up, and then you'll get these streams of light that are showing up in photographs as well. What we're using here is just a standard, Eddie just got a standard camera. It did have infrared on it. So the infrared's broken, ironically, it doesn't work anymore, but we haven't bothered to fix anything with it. So the infrared here camera is just picking up just normal energy that you can see here as well. And the group will see this light that's producing with the physical eye at times, but they most definitely are seeing more recently more of a hologram effect to the left of me where they can see somebody standing in that field. And then if we look at this photograph, this is an interesting photograph. If we look at this photograph, you'll see my head is quite solid in front of the television. My left hand is down, and I don't know why my hands are even up like this. That's the interesting part. But you'll see the bib. There's sort of like a triangular bib occurring near the mouth area, and you'll see my right hand. You can see my arm and my sleeve is coming across. It looks like my hands are coming in towards the mouth area. They're utilising my hands. But you'll see on the far left, if you look at my head, it's quite solid. But the hand that's showing on the far left here, if we zoom into that, that hand seems to be quite transparent here, that large hand to the left. And you'll see on a large monitor, you can even see the fingernails up here, and you can see the line of the television. Whereas I'm solid here, but this hand is quite transparent. So we've got many photos, but these are just basic ones that I decided to show you today to see the difference in that altered state. So I believe here we have the production, I suppose, of a hand of one of my spirit teams that are working with me. So yeah, there's just a couple of photographs, but it gives you a bit of an idea of how energy can project itself on basic camera. We've got lots on video. We've had voices on video over time. What we are noticing that's quite interesting is we don't know why. When I go into trance, the fridge motor goes on. In the moment that I go into trance, they use the engine of the fridge as well as any computer equipment or anything that's going on. And when I come back out of trance, the fridge engine winds down. So they seem to be using, so perhaps sit in front of your fridge, I don't know. The energy of the fridge, it's an amazing syncness that's going on between my spirit team and this fridge motor. So do you have any questions around that?
Hi, Louise.
Hello.
I'm absolutely fascinated with your, and I know other mediums here, developing mediums, and are working in light. I'm very curious, though, about your progression of trance states. You talked a little bit about that, but can you tell us a little bit more about the deepness of the trance, perhaps the different stages of consciousness in your trance, images that you might have seen? Were you fully out the entire time? Did you come back in and out? Anything you can tell us about your trance states would be very illuminating.
The altered state, Rob, that I go through is I'm finding I'm actually more conscious, not in the Wednesday night group, but in any physical mediumship that I'm doing publicly or anything else again. So just to answer that, Rob, with the altered state, for me personally, I'm pretty much sure I'm out very quickly. So as I'm sitting in the chair and I go into the altered state, I used to feel the power. I used to feel the power building up, the spirit team building up. None of that's really felt now at all. I think it's just quite a normal process for me now. So you sit in the chair, you build that power up. In the earlier stages, you would feel the power building up, and I would feel the rocking sensation. Just off memory, I'm going off memory for anyone that's in or developing or working in this area. And then I would go into the altered state. I wouldn't say I saw any images. I wouldn't say, what's interesting, as I'm going in the altered state and as I'm coming out of the altered state, I would say that I would speak to Eddie or anyone else in the group, and my recollection of what's occurred in the room is me interacting with their loved ones in spirit. So I may come back with a totally different viewpoint of I may be excited and I'll say, does anyone know so-and-so that's passed in the spirit world? Yes, and I'm excited about that, but everyone else is more excited about what's going on in the room. So for me, it's not a process of seeing anything or hearing anything. The energy and the power is definitely building up. But I believe that's dependent, Rob, upon trust. I truly believe that. There is so much trust between myself and my team that the altered state is so seamless after all these years that I slip in and out of that state depending on the need. So I don't see anything, sometimes I'll hear things going on, but it won't be here to be in the room, in the spirit room where they're working. We've heard this on audio over the time. We've heard scientists on the other side talking about me when Eddie's played back the audio. They talk about me and, you know, the medium's doing this and the medium's doing that. So I have heard, I'm very clairaudient, I rely on that. I've heard things, but I don't focus on that because that can bring me back into the conscious state. So as I go into that altered state, I'm out pretty quickly. And then I suppose I'm probably out for a good hour, used to be up to 2 to 2.5 hours in the earlier stages. And then as I'm coming back out, probably the most interesting thing is I'd feel hungry, like I'd want to eat meals that, so when Sebash first came through and he spoke fluent Chinese, I wanted to eat Chinese when I came out. So I felt that, yes, I want to eat Chinese or, yeah, so the altered state for me is, I don't really focus on it. It's very comfortable, very seamless, And I think I've done it many, many times before. Even when it first happened, when they came through in an outburst, it felt very comfortable and I was conscious when they came through. So the first times that they came through for me, I was conscious. I was in a public forum, and when they came through, it was so natural. There was somebody that had a problem, and a Chinese person just came through and spoke through me, and I was awake. And they answered their question in Chinese. So, and it felt quite seamless. So the altered state, I believe, we just sit in that power. And I have a saying where I say, you just surrender to the blender. That's it. You surrender to the blender of spirit. And sometimes there'll be a jolt if there's problems with the conditions. And I believe those conditions are very much dependent on what's going on Earth. If we have an earthquake or there's been a terrorist attack, I find that I jolt a little bit more. It's interesting because I believe as they try to ground that energy, the consciousness here on the earth plane has been affected. So they have to sort of get it. The way I view it is a double battery behind them, like a solar backup, to get the medium into that altered state much quicker. So I'm out most of the time. However, I'm finding I'm becoming more conscious. That's the interesting thing now. In Eddie's group, in our group on Wednesday night, I'm out the whole time. But when I sit, even with my own self, I'm doing things that the altered state, there's a lot of stuff going on when I'm conscious as well. And I believe that's the future. It'll be in light and it will be when you're conscious. That's my belief system.
Louise, there's a question from Craig Hogan.
Yep.
Craig, I've unmuted you if you wish to speak.
Yeah, hi, Louise. When you have that rocking sensation, our team, we have 3 sitters in our team with Rob, who is our physical medium. The 3 sitters are going into trance, and they're having a rocking that's against their volition. They're not choosing to do it, or what they describe as marionette hands. That their hands are being moved up and down, and they're being rocked back and forth. Is that the kind of rocking that you've had?
Yeah. It's a rocking. What it is, it's the blending of the energy, Craig. So they're blending. So what happens is they blend that energy, and we actually have my guide, one of my main guides. He comes through and actually drums. They've got him a drum, and they strap it to my legs. So my main guide drums the house down, wakes up neighbours and all the rest of it before the session starts. And we call him, Animal out of the Muppets, because he's like Animal out of the Muppets. He goes completely crazy. So I believe that blending of that energy that occurs, that rocking, is the blending of the energy. And then the hands, they gain control of the hands, I believe, to ground that energy in. Now, the hands may not even physically move. It's their etheric body that's being impressed upon. So the spirit team is impressing upon the etheric body of that person. And for many, many years, they just had control of my voice box. But in the last couple of years, the team have strapped a drum to my legs, and Numanji just drums and physically moves my arms now very, very quickly. And Eddie does drumming, and Eddie said he's faster than some of the drummers that are on YouTube. He timed it. So if you allow the spirit team to blend, they move from the etheric body then into the physical, and they start moving parts of the body, such as arms or whatever it is. So I believe there is a fear in that. I believe that a lot of people have a fear once they start impressing onto the etheric body. And I think the rocking is just the blending from the etheric body of those to your etheric body, but the rocking's not intentional. It's the subconscious mind trying to handle where it's the minds blending over the minds, and the 2 etheric bodies of yours and theirs blending has this effect of blending back and forth, like an ebb and a flow. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Yep.
So we start to rock. And then after many, many years, I believe the best way to describe this, how they showed me, is there's a glove the mind is here, of course, the mind's not in the brain, and they have a glove, and over time my team managed to move the legs, move the arms. Recently they're starting to try and stand up. So in this glove, they've now got such control of the mind, they're now able to move the arms with such proficiency and drum and do all of this. Now the legs, they're having a go at that. So they're mastering these aspects of the mind. And I believe the rocking stops as the blend over the years becomes so seamless.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
That's good. Very good explanation. Yeah. That is what happens. And they have the marionette feel in their hands, and they'll actually beat on the table. Or one of them feels like she's playing the piano on the table. Yeah.
Brilliant. And perhaps do some experiments where put like a little drum or a tambourine, or put something in the medium's hand and strap it to see if someone wants the drum. And I believe this is what I believe. I believe that we have our main guide, our main spirit that comes through and controls everything. But there's guides that are above that are able to say, hey, can we get somebody in your team to give us a tune? And I think when you set up experiments, Craig, that have humour and fun, they want to come on board, and that raises the vibration as well.
Good. Thank you.
That's okay. Not that I probably should say we never intended for any of that. It happened very naturally for me. But if I was to run a development group, which I've got no time for, but if I was to run a development group looking back, I would encourage all these things, different language. Give me somebody to speak in a different language so I know it's not my subconscious mind. Or have somebody play an instrument. I've never played the drums, and I can play the drums brilliantly. So give me somebody that uses an aspect of my mind that hasn't been activated in this lifetime, and encourage that. And that gives confidence to the medium that it's not them. I don't sit for physical per se. I just sit now. I never used to sit. I've never meditated in 10 years. But only in the last couple of years, I've just been sitting and letting the chemists or the spirit team just work and sit with that energy in that space of time. So nothing much really happens. I think they just build the power cell up for Wednesday nights, or they use that energy on Friday nights. So I think we sometimes need to just sit and not really have an intention. Sometimes I'll sit with a notepad and pen, and automatic writing will come through. And that's another aspect that we need to investigate as well. I wrote my second book through automatic writing. That we just need to just sit in that blend. Yes, I do sit. And there was times where I was just drumming just morning after morning after morning. And what I noticed was in that drumming was where the ectoplasm energy was starting to build up. So Namanji uses the drum to build that energy up. But that's all sort of stopped, and I was given the message that would stop after a period of time once the spirit world could then just come straight in and produce what they need to do. But yeah, I just sit, and you've got to have no fear of sitting with your spirit team. I know there's a lot of people out there say you shouldn't sit on your own. I don't sit in an unconscious state. I just sit, and I set a timer for 30 minutes to say, hey guys, if you want to do a tune-up or do anything, we're just sitting here in a space and allowing you to do what you need to do. So I don't think there's any rules around that.
I'm very interested in hearing more about the moving into demonstrating in the light. Now, you say that that demonstrating in the dark or moving in that direction is kind of going backwards, or, I mean, I'd like to hear more about and I think the question is here, is it traditional ectoplasm? I mean, it sounds more like energy, physical mediumship, like using some kind of energy rather than the traditional ectoplasm, or are you describing something entirely new?
Okay, that's a good question, Rob. It varies. Sometimes, and Eddie has taken a little sample of what we see. When I've had it publicly, so I'm demonstrating publicly in mental mediumship, when that's occurred, I can only say what people have experienced. I'll get a large pull. There'll be a cold breeze that comes across the front of the audience. And some people have reported like a fog of some sort above my head area. And what was interesting is that a fishing hook went through somebody's shoe. I was demonstrating and talking about a fishing hook that this lady's a lady's husband. I was talking to her in the reading, and I was wondering why there was so much noise in the room going on in the audience. And these two young girls had never been to a demonstration, so I felt sorry for them, were grabbed on the foot. And I was reading for a lady at the back of the audience talking about in detail her husband's fishing hook that he had made. And as I was going into detail, these two young girls were yelling at the front, and they felt like a wet hand grabbed them on the foot, and a fishing hook went through a shoe. I was brilliant. Not for them, but for me it was. And so they all felt the cold breeze. They felt this wetness, which, you know, comes, they know nothing about physical mediumship. So it depends. I believe it depends. So sometimes we'll get a little bit of that, you know, that feeling of a wet hand being present. So that was in full light. That was in a full mental mediumship audience demonstration. So primarily, yes, it's energy. People report fog. I mean, transfiguration is so common now in my demonstrations that I demonstrate mental mediumship. So one thing I probably should warn on this, I know we're getting in further into the depth of the energy, I don't educate the audiences on this. It's best to tell them nothing, because there's nothing in the mind that creates expectations. And so what we're finding, what they're experiencing is just different energy. And I just think the spirit world are experimenting with different types of energy. So yes, there is ectoplasm. I've woken up plenty of times, or when I've gone to bed of a night, and you'll feel the fluid coming from the ear, and you touch it and it's got the stickiness. And then I've heard voices underneath the chin area. That's been going on for about 3 years. And so they're forming a larynx, not a full voice box, just the larynx that sits underneath the chin area. So I believe, yes, I believe I'm working on all the spectrums. I believe it's like a bit of a race, and whatever one works best with me, they'll use. That's what I believe. I believe they're experimenting with all different types of energy. And because I'm open to work with anything, I'm open to work with any type of energy. The first lot of energy, though, was making me quite nauseous. And even in front of the audience when it was happening, I was feeling quite ill all of a sudden. And it was a draw on the energy, and I would say to the spirit tail, I'm not feeling well. And then they would pull the energy back. So that nauseous feeling was quite instant. And I knew something was being drawn from that. So it's a combination, but I do think we're moving towards an energy that would have perhaps a bit of ectoplasm in it somewhere, because perhaps the ectoplasm is required for the materialization. I'm not sure. That I'm not sure of. They're experimenting, and I believe that they are using the energy of the audience and a mental mediumship to do that experimentation as well.
Hello, Louise.
Hello, how are you?
Thank you very much. Nice to see everybody here. Yes, very much the same. I cannot but agree with you. In specific, when you start talking about trance, I think that was really, that hit me right, really. The rocking forward and backwards, the way that you was talking about going into trance, and also now you're not, you know, sort of in trance all the time, you're much more conscious. I don't know about you, but when I actually said, I have to turn around and say that my hearing becomes very, very loud. I seem to hear everything that goes around me. And what had happened to me recently, Louise, I don't know if it ever happened to you, but suddenly the person that goes in trance with me, which is a man called Ejner Nielsen, who was a physical medium in Denmark, when he wants to go out to investigate the circle itself, he leaves me, but in his place, he sets an opera singer in who starts singing.
That's interesting that you talk about an opera singer, because we've had an opera singer joining our group, and people are hearing voices at the back of my mental mediumship and a whole soprano of people singing opera. So that's I believe that this is interesting. I believe they're tuning the larynx of the ectoplasmic voice box in the new energy. That's why they have opera singers.
That's interesting, because that recently happened suddenly when Ejner Nielsen left me in the middle of a trance to go out and see what the problem were outside. Suddenly this enormous voice came through starting to sing. And when I heard it, I mean, after we had a tape, I was in shock. I said, what? I can't reach those notes at all, but very interesting.
That's brilliant. And just to add to that, I want to add to that, I haven't sang, I don't think I have, Eddie can correct me on this, I don't sing as an opera singer, but we have independent voice as the opera singer. Now, just to add to your situation, I believe this. They are coating your larynx with ectoplasm first, with the opera singer, and once that has been refined, which I've done for many years, they will take that mirrored larynx in an independent voice state. So I believe over the years they first coat the physical medium's larynx itself, okay, here. So when I go to bed of a night time, I feel it running, coming straight up here and coating the larynx, and then I'll bellow things out. They will coat your larynx first for a long time. An opera singer will attune it first, and then they will take that eventually and it will become independent voice from you.
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay,
absolutely.
So
thank you.
That's what we found. I wasn't singing through the larynx, but Namanji would be drumming and singing through my larynx, and then we were discovering that people were hearing opera singing above them in the audiences or at the back of it, and it would be not one or two, it'd be about 5 people singing opera. So I believe this is what I believe. The spirit world needs to first replicate your voice box with ectoplasm over the larynx itself, and then once that's mastered, it becomes independent of you, like a clone.
Wow, yeah, it makes really a lot of sense. Thank you.
I've read that you can't mix the energy with the ectoplasm, and you seem to be doing that. But I think your experimentation concept is what kind of explains that, is that the more experimental we are, the more they will use everything around us to be able to communicate, because that's a lot of what I do. But I have a question for you. When I'm going into trance, and this started happening automatically, and it goes back to the rocking question, my legs levitate. And I mean, I'm not, they bring my legs straight up into the air, and they stay there for, I don't know how long, but they're there.
Okay, it's funny because before you even said anything, before you even came on, I had a visual of you being thrown off a bed. It hasn't happened yet, it could happen. That's just the central nervous system responding. It's our physical body fighting as well. So part of the subconscious mind, even with the rocking, all this is, the guides are not intending to do any of this. It's our subconscious mind responding to the energy. Okay? What will happen over a period of time, that will just become all seamless. So even though you're rocking, there's a part of your subconscious mind that sort of wants to ground the energy, but your body's just responding that way. Okay? Because spirit wouldn't use all that energy to physically move us around too much, because we're expending too much energy, logically, from the spirit team's perspective. So what happens is your legs are moving up and levitating up. It's a response to the energy. And of course, I've had lots of levitation where I've levitated from one end of the bed to the other and physically moved. And my spirit team just said, you thought for a moment that you weren't in a physical body. Your etheric body, the mind was so blended just with the etheric body, it just moved it. And of course, then you're getting into in-depth dematerialization and rematerialization, where we quicken our frequency up and we move, and then we rematerialize. And that's probably too much for this session to talk about just now. So sometimes our atoms can quicken up as the frequency quickens up, and your legs can levitate and move because the mind's thinking that it's moved. So, but as physical mediums, we've also got to be careful that we don't start getting up and walking about the room and mimicking what's being thought by the spirit team. And I know that's why they probably had restrained physical mediums many years ago, because the physical body can start mimicking what they're thinking. So if your spirit team's levitating or hovering above somewhere and they're blending very well with your mind, your physical body can start replicating that unintentionally. Does this make sense?
Yes, it does.
It's just the physical. I was always worried I'd go down and get Chinese food for my guide because I was moving around a bit. So it's only when you're up and you're walking off somewhere that you need to be concerned. But I believe this is what I believe. A lot of what occurs physically with our bodies, I believe the spirit team wouldn't want that to happen unless it was something like drumming where they're trying to raise the vibration to do their work. I believe a lot of it is our subconscious mind responding, because it's not normal really to have multiple minds using one physical vessel.
I'm just fascinated right now, and I love everything that you have shared. I resonate with it highly, and I really appreciated you bringing up the asking spirit to manifest through in a way that validates that it is them and not us. I think for me, that's a big challenge, is trying to discern between my own subconscious thoughts and ideas and even my higher conscious thoughts and ideas, the inspiration from spirit. So I happen to be a sound therapist, and one of the things that I do in healing as well. And so I'm really going to continue to, I always try and experiment with trying to bring through a saint or a sage or someone who played music from way back when in a healing way. And so I thought, now I'm going to really try and bring that intention through more, that they can play through me for service. So
Absolutely.
I'm in such a state of wow right now, and super inspired by everything that you shared. And I'm sure as soon as we log off, I'll be like, but wait, how about?
Thank you. Thank you so much for just sharing everything. Just like everyone else, I'm just like so excited and pumped up and ready to go back and try all of these new things. I guess for me, it's really with the trance part, really just getting into that state of trance and relaxing and allowing my spirit team to just guide me. Is there any tips that you could provide to just really, I feel like I'm already like, it's just that trust piece, I feel like is what's maybe that full trust. But any tips maybe that you could provide to really help me just relax and get into that full trance state?
Okay. As you guys have been talking, I've just receiving some information from my team. And one of the things I want to add here is humour. You've really got to be able to, you know, Victor, Wendy and I met for breakfast for 3 hours on Saturday morning, and we laughed. We look at the funny side of things. I have a lot of humour with my spirit team, a lot of humour. And I think there's just too much seriousness in this, in physical and trance mediumship. So I'm just getting from my spirit team now, they're just impressing on my mind here. How about, this is a bit of homework, I should be given homework because I'm not sort of teaching this group. They're just giving me some homework here, that, you know, sit with your spirit team. We're dealing with an intelligence. We're dealing with an intelligence that has a good sense of humour. How about you sit down, and they're just impressing into my mind now that just ask them for a riddle or a rhyme, Now, what I mean by this, it might be that you live in the US and you sit there with a pen and paper and you're going into a trance state with a group or on your own, and just say to them, impress on me this evening a riddle or a rhyme. And it may be that you are going into this state and you're going into it with humour. Humour raises the vibration. Humour also removes the expectations that are there. And when you go into that state, you know, you really got to be willing to laugh at yourself. This is a problem with trance mediumship. We have brought through Ludwig, who was the most serious philosopher. 400 hours of serious philosophy came through me. But he brought through some crackers as well. So this is where you want to, when you're developing, you want to build a relationship with your team. So perhaps as a bit of homework, the next time you go into trance, say, give me a riddle or a rhyme. And if I was in your situation and I wasn't completely in the unconscious state, as an experiment, I would sit in the chair and I would say, I want a riddle and I want a rhyme. I want a riddle and I want a rhyme. And I would keep saying that into the group, and maybe get your sitters to say, we want a riddle and a rhyme, we want a riddle and a rhyme, or whatever. and get yourself into that state, and rubbish will start coming out of your mouth. It may be some Scottish pub rhyme. I'm not sure what will come out of your mouth. Okay? And get them to give you something that's ancient that you can Google, something you can validate, something that is humorous that keeps the vibration going. And I think that that's the best way. It couldn't be in your subconscious mind, because it's a riddle or a rhyme that's 200 or 300 years old, and it's coming out of your mouth. Okay? And so they, even though your guide may be an Australian, he has the intelligence to go and learn a Scottish riddle or rhyme. And I think this is the problem, is that we limit, oh, well, my guide's from South America, therefore he can't understand. Well, tell him to go off and do some homework. You both need to be working on both sides. We're dealing with active intelligence, and we can't be passive. We had, when the Manji was coming through and speaking, we sent his language off to the linguistic departments of the universities. Okay, and we got them to check it out. They said it's a couple of thousand years old. So what I'm saying is this: use some humour, and we really got to get over ourselves in trance. Okay, you really got to get over yourself, and when you're sitting with the sitters, this is what I believe. People have expectations of a sitters are here. They're going to be expecting some grand philosophy coming through. You're putting all these expectations on yourself. You're lowering the vibration, and expectations result in disappointment, which results in nothing. Okay? So I believe that you sit in that group. We have a hell of a lot of laughs in our group. And, I mean, when the Manji first came drumming like Animal out of the Muppets, it was funny, and we nicknamed him Animal, okay? So we've got to build this humorous relationship up with our guides, and we still need to have evidence as well. So how about you give me a rhyme or a song or something I could possibly not know? And there's no pressure.